Okay, everyone, places, and action.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
You talking to me?
Here, looks like you boys have seen a lot of action.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Why so serious?
I am serious, and don't call me Shirley.
This is the Cinema Plus podcast, brought to you by More Movies.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cinema Plus podcast. I'm Greg Fisher, and today I'm joined by my good friend and colleague Dave Roberts as we take a look back at Quentin Tarantino's ninth film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which was released this time last year in the summer of 2019. The film stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, and Margot Robbie in a story that blends real-life characters with fictional creations and is set in Los Angeles in the late 60s, leading up to the infamous Manson Family murders of the movie star Sharon Tate and her entourage. Once Upon a Time is Tarantino's tribute to a Hollywood of yesteryear, one which the director grew up in and has been influenced by throughout his illustrious career. The story follows a washed-up TV and movie star called Rick Dalton, who is struggling to find decent parts in a rapidly changing industry that favours youthful progressives over time-served veterans. Let's begin with an excerpt of Tarantino talking about the film.
Especially since, when it came to 1969, I was between 6 and 7 years old, and so the film became a big memory piece, and big part of my memory of Los Angeles at that time is being in the car with my stepfather, or being in the car with my mom, and driving around and listening to the radio playing all the time, and how we listened to the radio back then, which is different than the way we listen to the radio now, where you just, you kept it on one station. You didn't move around looking for songs. And then when the commercials played, you played the radio really loud, and when the commercials played, you didn't turn the radio down. You just talked over it, over the already loud radio. And I remember the bus stops advertising the rerun shows that are on the local television stations, and the movie posters, and the Diet Right, RC Cola billboards, all that kind of stuff. That's what I remember. In fact, there's even my stepfather drove a Carmen Ghia, like Cliff's character drives. And even that whole shot where you see Cliff driving by those signs, I'm like, well, that's pretty much my view, looking up at my stepfather in the Carmen Ghia as he drove around Los Angeles, me looking up at him like that, an angle very similar to what we had with Brad. So it's in the same way that Jackie Brown, I think, has the kind of me trying to capture the South Bay of the 80s. That's what I was trying to do with this.
So there's the great man himself, Quentin Tarantino, talking about the film. Now, Dave and I actually went to see this film together with a friend of ours, Tom, when it came out in August over here last year. Dave, what a great film to see in the cinema.
One of the best to see in the cinema. I think I make it a point to go and see a Tarantino film in the cinema. He's a cinema director. He's a master of that. And I think when you go and see a film like that, it's just so enjoyable. It's exactly what you want to see. And if you're a cinema buff, it is, go and see it at the pictures, because this is going to be an enjoyable ride. It's an event. It's event cinema, isn't it?
Well, it's funny because it's not the kind of cinema that maybe is considered event cinema in terms of big blockbuster special effects movies of nowadays, where you've got the Marvel franchise and the Star Wars franchise, etc., etc. You've got all this spectacle that does benefit being seen on a big screen. Some people would say, oh, well, Tarantino, not that much happens. Why would you want to see it in the cinema? And I'll just watch it on DVD. But, you're absolutely right. This is such a spectacle on the big screen. One example is when Brad Pitt first drives home from DiCaprio's place after he's finished work for the first day, and he goes home in his own car and he just rips it through the streets. When that happened, when we were watching it, I actually had hair stand up on my arm, because it would just look so amazing, and you really felt like you were right there rushing alongside the car with the wind in your hair, with the music going, with all that Los Angeles backdrop. I was literally buzzing.
Yeah, I think it's a buzz, and I think when we say event cinema, this is a director that has always said he'd only do 10 films. Such a revered director, that creates visual masterpieces. So I think it's in that sense that this is when a film of Tarantino comes out, like some other directors, it's special, and you've got to go and watch it because you don't know when you'll get a chance to see it again. And okay, yes, it's not a blockbuster film, of course, but they're more event cinema because the studios make them event cinema. They're franchises, they're built up that way. It's the whole marketing of the thing. This is more of an organic event cinema in terms of Tarantino's got millions of fans and they want to go see this film.
Well, this is also the conversation at the moment that Martin Scorsese kind of was the catalyst of around the whole issue of what constitutes as cinema and what constitutes as what he described as theme park experience kind of films, which of course he was talking about the Marvel franchise in particular. Obviously, you know, in the center of this argument, forgetting both extremes on either side, there is a very good point to be made about, you know, these films are, of course, still cinema. They're still released in a cinema, and it's a movie theater experience. But he does come from a background of really just really great films, great dramas, and thrillers, and what film fans might consider to be, you know, high art or top class films. Whereas maybe some fans of the Marvel franchise are feeling like it's getting looked down upon. But talking about, you know, bringing it back to Tarantino, this is the kind of thing where the Martin Scorsese would probably put his stamp of approval on to say, yes, this is cinema. This is what you should, you know, what the movie theaters were made for, and this is what you should go and see when you go to see a great movie. And as you said yourself, Tarantino, you know, he only wants to make 10 films. I mean, you know, what's that about? Why only 10? I mean, Akira Kurosawa was still making movies in his 80s, you know. I know he didn't make a million movies, but, you know, you could still keep going.
Yeah, I think it's one of them peculiar kind of foibles of someone like Tarantino. It's just one of them really strange things. And maybe he'll go back on it. I hope he goes back on it, to be honest. I'm well up for a lot more. Yeah.
11.
But
Quentin Tarantino's 12th
he turned
movie.
his back.
The 13th chapter.
Maybe he'll just start calling him, 10.1, 10.2. It's a 10-part film, the next one.
Well, he said he might do television and other little projects. But, you know, look at George Lucas said he was going to go and direct a load of stuff that no one would see, and he's just going to make for himself. He probably hasn't done shit since.
He's counting that money. That's what he's doing.
It's take him the rest of his life to count that money. But yeah,
I mean, interestingly, Tarantino is talking about doing this Bounty Law, which is in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, as a series, which would be interesting.
Has he actually talked about doing
he's
that?
Claimed, and you never know with Tarantino because he's claimed a lot of things over the years which have never appeared.
Yeah,
but,
he likes to.
The
wind
claim
people
is
up.
that he's written 5 episodes of it, and that he's interested in doing a series.
Oh, I bet he's done that. I wouldn't put it past him to have done that. And he probably made DiCaprio read it just to say, Rick Dalton
come
would have
on,
read
do
all
it,
the
you
scripts.
bitch.
Make yourself a mojito and read the
Right
scripts.
in the pool over there.
Yes, Quentin. Yeah, sit in your pool on that floating chair with a stein full of booze and read my fucking scripts, okay? So, if they did film that, the potential for guest stars is amazing, because he hinted at that, you know, Michael Madsen in there in that one episode, and obviously these episodic USA serials like that always had a guest star each week. Look at Columbo, they were all in Columbo and stuff. But do you think DiCaprio would commit to something like that? Because as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I know, he's never really done any television.
I'm not sure. I don't know if he did something early on in his career, perhaps. I'm not 100% on that. I know some of the American stars did. But I think if you'd have asked that question 5 years ago or 10 years ago, it would have been no chance. I think today, in today's climate, we've seen Scorsese go to Netflix. we see the budgets of these TV shows on these streaming services, there's no shadow of a doubt that Tarantino would be given the biggest budget you'd ever see for a series on something like Netflix or Amazon or one of those, and could well afford someone like DiCaprio, and he would well be up for doing it, you know.
Maybe it'd be like, you know, that Buster Scruggs that the Coen brothers did. It was kind of episodic, but if you put it all together, it would be one, you know, a huge movie full of vignettes. So what you say there about the Netflix idea, maybe, or one of the big streaming services doing that, I could see it. And it would have to be a fight like The Mandalorian or something, you know, 6 episodes or so. Not a huge amount, not like the old days, 24 episodes or anything. It would be like, you know, 5 or 6 really good hour-length episodes, and
it'd be brilliant.
That would be hilarious. I'd love to see it. He's obviously got a bit of a penchant for the Western.
Yeah, I think he likes Western, and I think he clearly has a love for those serials from the 50s and 60s American television, because that's really present in his work.
Yeah, he grew up with them.
Yeah.
He grew up with them just like I grew up with the A-Team, Knight Rider, you know, all of that stuff.
And I grew up with
that 80s era.
And I grew up with Goosebumps.
Baywatch. You grew up with Baywatch.
I think even that's a bit before my time, if I'm honest. I think...
Well, you're making out like you're 12 years old or something?
I am.
Definitely.
I'm only 12.
Baywatch was big.
I don't recall watching it anyway. It may have been out, but he's got a fond memory for it. I think the two influences for Tarantino are kind of those early television serials and then the kind of cinema of the 70s.
Well,
I think they're the
he's a nerd. He's
a total
nerd,
nerd, yeah.
And he absolutely loves all of the B-movie actors, the ones that you never really heard of. That's why he's used them in his films. Someone like Michael Parks, who was in From Dusk Till Dawn and then later in the Kill Bill films. You know, he was a great actor, but he never really made it. He's a bit of a Rick Dalton himself.
Yeah.
You know, and I think to some degree it was the same with Robert Forster with Jackie Brown. You know, he kind of relaunched his career because he just, you know, take it to the nth degree. He did that with Christoph Waltz as well, kind of plucked him out of obscurity from German television and films and made him a double Oscar winning superstar.
Yeah, I think he's got a real skill and obviously a love for kind of taking people who are less well known or were stars once, as in like Travolta and people like that, and obviously have a bit of a downward trajectory and giving them a complete boost again. And I think it's really, really wonderful to see, really, when he does that, and it works so well.
It's nice he's done it with Kurt Russell in this film,
yeah,
with which he's obviously used him in Death Proof, Stuntman Mike. But and he, of course, in The Hateful Eight, he's used him again, and now even though it's a lesser role in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he's still in there, still a memorable part. And I like the fact that Tarantino is one of those directors that has a cast of stars that he does like to keep working with. I mean, Samuel L. Jackson wasn't in this one, as far as I'm aware, but
I think it's the first time, isn't it?
All of the others. Pardon?
I think it's the first time, isn't it, that Jackson isn't in one of his films, perhaps?
Yeah, possibly, yeah. But anyway, you know, he's worked with Brad Pitt in Inglourious Bastards. Yeah, and he's worked with DiCaprio before, of course, on Django Unchained. First time with Margot Robbie. Maybe he'll have her back again, like he did with Uma Thurman. He seemed to like working with her.
Well, I think what I really liked in this is the chemistry between Brad Pitt and DiCaprio, and I'd love to see more of that under Tarantino, if I'm honest, because I think they work so well together, and with his writing, it's really, really fun.
What do you mean, like those two starring together again as different characters in a Tarantino film, or those two as the same characters?
Well, I'd love to see both. If they did a series or something, that'd be really great. But just using those two actors
Well, if they did Bounty Law, you'd get that because if they did it kind of like the series within
the series,
the actual show itself, then you would get to see Rick Dalton and Cliff Booth rather than just seeing Rick Dalton, the character, and Cliff Booth as the stuntman being Rick Dalton.
Yeah,
so
that would be fun.
I mean, that would be very cool. Yeah, because then you could have them get into adventures outside of the film sets. So you could still have each episode and bits of it like he did within this film, where you get little snippets of it, and it actually, lets you sink into a scene and forget that there's a camera crew around and and the director and all the extras and stuff. Suddenly, you get into the scene and then it'll break you out again. They could do that with this like TV show, and then it'd be like, as soon as it's a wrap for the day and these guys go home and they get into some kind of adventure, that would be pretty good fun.
Or what you could do would be even more fun, I think. There was a sitcom quite a few years ago now. I can't remember what it was called. It was an American one. It was actually quite a big one, wasn't it? But where one of the series was behind the scenes and the other was the actual show they were producing, and I can't remember what it was called. But, that could be another way of doing it.
Doesn't ring any bells. I don't know what that was, but that's the kind of thing, though, where you've got that kind of meta thing going on.
Yeah.
I mean, they all love to do it, the film within the film. Look at Hail Caesar, we were talking about the other day. You've got several productions going on within that because it's about somebody who's the head of a major studio, so you got a similar deal going on here with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. As you'd imagine, it's Hollywood. We got the studio system. We got loads of productions being made. We got people who've got a bit of a past from having worked in the industry for a long time. Two guys at a crossroads in their lives, both intertwined but for different reasons. And we kind of catch up with them at a time when all this is kind of coming to a head, and they're at this crossroads in their lives where they're going to go one way or the other. And obviously that's all done against the backdrop of the fact that Charles Manson and his Manson family were all living on Spawn Ranch at the time, which they were.
Yeah. I think
that I love that element to it is all true. I mean, obviously Rick Dalton's fictional, even though he's an amalgamation of all these characters. Cliff Booth doesn't really exist. He's a Quentin Tarantino incarnation. But, as far as Tex and a couple of other those other killers that actually did kill Sharon Tate, they were all real. So it's a credible feat to mix these two worlds and pull it off the way he did.
Yeah, I think the mixing of the worlds, the ability to kind of take all the stuff that's real, which is a lot in it that's real, but put in these characters that are very believable. You completely get them. They're real archetypes of the people who were around at that time, and it blends seamlessly. But that, more than anything, I think is obviously it's down to Tarantino's fantastic writing, but it's also the performances. It's a great cast. You totally believe the Rick Dalton character. You totally believe the Cliff Booth character. You totally believe the Sharon Tate performance. It's really meaningful.
Let's just stop there and break that down a little bit, because that's a lot of ground you've just mentioned in 3 sentences there. I mean, DiCaprio's performance, it is an incredible performance, is it not? Because what we are witnessing is almost an emotional breakdown. It's like a man's menopause. It's like the male menopause. This kind of midlife crisis all hits him at once. He feels like he's washed up, and that whole thing at the start with Al Pacino, and kind of says to him, you're getting beat up in Hollywood. You're getting beat up. You're getting washed up. Come and star in these spaghetti westerns, and it just sends him on this sort of psychological bummer where he's just,
and amazingly
bits, crying on Cliff's shoulder.
And amazingly, that kind of breakdown, that kind of descent of the character plays out across 3 hours. It's a total long game performance of, it's not a breakdown that happens in 20 minutes. This plays out across the whole film. and you see every emotion. You see every emotion that man goes through, you know, and I think that's one of the incredible parts. Obviously, from something as over the top as the breakdown when he's in the caravan, the locker out the back,
the trailer,
and he is throwing stuff around and really kicking off at himself
because he's fucked his lines up and he's embarrassed himself in front of everyone. And he goes back to his trailer because he's been drinking the night before. He hasn't really prepared professionally, and he just takes it out on himself and just throws an absolute wobbly, as we would say, kicking things, smashing things, swearing at himself. It's a hilarious moment.
And then down to the more menacing kind of performance of him low playing it on set, where he forgets his lines or gets it wrong. And obviously the take has to stop, but it's not an over the top angry outburst. It's a low kind of kept within himself anger.
He's probably seen people do that, and he's just used that kind of energy where they're no, just self motivated for a second. Fuck it, they do that sort of thing and snap back into it. He's probably seen people do it, and he's just used that energy. But on juxtaposed to that, we've got Brad Pitt's character Cliff Booth, who is, in his own way, he's going through his own sort of changes, and he's looking at a different future for himself. But this guy, he hasn't got the success that Rick has enjoyed, but he is cool. He's calm. He's always measured. He deals with things that come towards him, whatever that may be. And he ends up, he can handle anything, basically. He's a guy who he's super cool. He can handle any shit.
He's Brad Pitt and he's cool as fuck. I mean, that's his performance kind of summed up. But there's a real gravitas to what he's pulling off. And it's a totally fun performance. You can tell that he enjoyed being on screen doing what he was doing. And to me, I know the scene received a lot of flack from certain quarters, but the fight with Bruce Lee in the parking lot is just so funny. It's just funny as fuck. It's so ridiculous, but it makes sense within the context of the story that's being told. It's obviously a bit of a daydream for Brad Pitt's character as he's on the roof, which I don't think many people took into account when they were criticising it, but it's just silly and fun, and why not? It was representing.
Well, it's not a daydream. It's like he's having a memory because he's been sent back to fix the aerial on the roof because there's no work for him on set because Randy's running the set, and the last time he was on a set with Randy, that happened on the set of The Green Hornet, where Bruce Lee, again, a real element to it all. Bruce Lee played Kato on The Green Hornet show and became, in a sense, the real star of the show. But you raised a very good point that it was a controversial scene. I think Bruce Lee's daughter wasn't too pleased about the portrayal of her dad in it. Other people have criticised it as well. Obviously, people who are major fans of Bruce Lee. I mean, I'm a fan of Bruce Lee. I've watched all his films. I had my time of really enjoying watching them, and when Enter the Dragon came on TV when you were a kid, it was a great treat. It was like fantastic action, martial arts action. He was the best, but I wasn't insulted by the interpretation of him there. I think Tarantino did him as a kind of cocky, a little bit, comes across as a little bit arrogant, a little bit cocky, and someone like, he's basically trying to reaffirm that Cliff Booth is the real deal tough guy. He was in World War II. He was a trained like special ops kind of guy. He was the that Audie Murphy character that just was a war hero, like Dalton says to Kurt Russell's character. He's the goddamn war hero. Well, this is the thing when Bruce Lee's like doing his Bruce Lee thing and talking about his hands being lethal weapons.
That's a brilliant gag.
Sitting there like, anyone kills anyone in a fight, it's manslaughter. Whatever he says, so funny.
It's a brilliant gag.
And then, the funniest payoff in that scene is when she comes out
and kicks off,
and kicks everybody's ass. Well, especially Brad Pitt, because she hates him anyway, as Kurt Russell has said beforehand.
See, I always interpreted that scene differently. I always thought, to me, it was like him thinking of being on set as he's on the roof, like dreaming of being on set, and that's what he tells people happened on set. Like the wild stories, people always say, "Oh, this happened on set," and it never really happened. It was far less than what they make it out to be. It's kind of like a vague memory of it, kind of thing. That's how I always interpret it. But I think there's nothing in there, to me anyway, that like insults the memory of Bruce Lee, because anyone who could take that seriously.
No, because when Zoe Bell comes out, she says he's the goddamn lead on the show.
Yeah,
she's I don't think Tarantino was trying to.
He's a big fan as well.
In a way, it's a fun way to use Bruce Lee's kind of character in the film. He's not doing it as the real Bruce Lee. He wouldn't have done that. But I mean, he uses him again because Sharon Tate did actually do some training with Bruce Lee, because he used to train all those Hollywood stars, Steve McQueen and James Coburn, or people like that. So he did actually train her to do the work that was required, and he put that in there in when she has that flashback memory, because when she's watching it, she's remembering at one point Bruce teaching her all the moves. And that's a nice little tribute as well. That was part of the scene in the Hollywood scene in the late 60s. Bruce Lee was the guy you go to get your kung fu training.
He's the action guy.
He is. He was the one that taught them to fight. With that, because it was a new thing then. But he is tributed with bringing martial arts to Hollywood.
To Hollywood, absolutely.
Rightly so.
On that point, talking of criticism of the film. Although I think overall, most people had a very positive take on the film, and certainly most people I spoke to had a positive take on the film, and we've both enjoyed it thoroughly.
Well, we had an experience watching it, didn't we?
I think
we went
so.
to the cinema. We were totally blown away. We come back, we were on cloud nine, having seen it.
But there has been, in certain quarters, criticism of it. Often the criticism that is levelled at Tarantino quite often. For example, Matt Chipola at the Film Monthly talked about it lacking purpose and gravitating towards the easiest.
Who did?
Matt Chipola at the Film Monthly talked about it often lacking purpose and gravitating towards easy targets.
Well, you know what? I reject this hypothesis.
Reject it completely. And so just thought I'd play a clip here of, obviously, renowned film reviewer Mark Kermode at the BBC just talking about the film, and just get your reaction on what he says.
I think it's also fantastically ill-disciplined, and there's more shoe leather in this film than I've seen in many. There's more shots of people walking from one place to another, because and now Robbie was talking about this as saying that his interpretation of it was that they were living in a period when time was running out, but they didn't realise that time was running out. And I think that's a very convincingly put argument. I don't buy it for a minute, but I think it's a very good argument. I don't think that that's the case. I think that it's the bagginess of the storytelling. It basically means that there are whole sections like Brad Pitt up on the roof which you just should be gone. I also think there are things like the Bruce Lee scene, which I thought was unforgivable. I mean, just flat out unforgivable. And anyone with any discipline would have just said that's coming out, although it's a setup for a gag. I think the way it looks is gorgeous. There's never been any question that that you can inhale the cinema of Tarantino. I think there are certain moments in it that were very funny, and certain moments in it that were actually really weirdly, surprisingly moving. But I did feel once again, and I, at the risk of sounding like a stuck record, that for me, what I want is precision and concision. You don't get that from Tarantino. What you get is you wander into this world and you sort of inhabit it for a very long time, and then about 2 hours in, it stops and there's a voiceover which explains a whole bunch. You just think you've had 2 hours.
that the Bruce Lee thing. I don't know when he says unforgivable. Is it? Do you think he's talking about obviously the portrayal of Bruce?
I'm not sure. I don't know if he means that it's unforgivable in terms of taste, in terms of the betrayal, or whether it doesn't need to be there. I'm not 100% sure on that, if I'm honest.
Well, he said that he noted that it does serve
It sets up a gag, yeah.
You know, it sets up a gag in the scene, but I think he must be talking about portraying Bruce Lee as a bit of showboat.
Yeah, I don't agree with that kind of interpretation of it.
Well, I don't, because I just thought what he's trying to hammer home is this is how hard Cliff Booth is. That if he had a fight with Bruce Lee,
he'd win.
Kick his ass.
Yeah.
Or at least even Steven, because they both get each other down once. So we got to say it was a bit of a draw. But that was the whole thing when I was growing up. Anyway, oh, my dad's so hard he could have Bruce Lee.
Yeah,
that sort of thing. It was always Bruce Lee was this benchmark of nobody can beat Bruce Lee because he's the ultimate fighter, and that's what I felt like Tarantino was getting at. He just used that side of Bruce's personality that was could be construed as arrogant.
And I think that as well, that people, it almost feels like people are criticising it, going, "Oh, Bruce Lee's really hard, and could beat him," kind of thing. It kind of feels like it comes from that angle a bit, and it's kind of a bit childish.
Yeah, and no one's attacking him for saying, "Oh, he made Sam Wanamaker out to be a bit of a coke sniffing, crazy old Hugh Hefner kind of ass slapping," which he wasn't. He wasn't. No. I don't think Sam Wanamaker was anything like the portrayal in the film, which was fantastic by Nicholas Hammond, because I haven't really seen Nicholas Hammond in anything for years. And when I was a kid, he was the first Spider-Man. He was the TV Spider-Man. Peter Parker, because I imagine most of the time in the suit was some stuntman, but he was, in my mind as a child, the first sort of TV, actor to play Spider-Man. And again, like that whole tradition of using actors that should have done more than they actually did in the end, should have achieved more. Nicholas Hammond is a great example of that. So he's even used him as the director of the movie, and he's done this crazy portrayal of Sam Wanamaker, when he's going on about he does that motorbike thing, doesn't he? Which is like, it's a bit over the top when he does it. It makes you sort of laugh out loud, but he does it with just enough sort of enthusiasm that you just accept it. But like with the Bruce Lee thing, I don't think Tarantino's trying to say this is the kind of guy Sam Wanamaker was. It's like a caricature, more than a character.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's just a kind of an idealized version in this world he's made up. It's not. This ain't a biography. This is a biopic. This is a narrative tale that it
is a fairy tale.
Yeah, and in the end,
fairy tale. Once upon a time.
That's it, because it doesn't end how real life ends. It's a completely different thing. It's just very much inspired.
Now let's talk about that. Because anyone who's listening, I would think that they've seen this movie. If they haven't and they're listening to this,
turn off now.
Well, we're obviously talking. Well, yeah, and already we've been talking about stuff that could be considered as spoilers in inverted commas. But the end to this film, now, for me, I was watching it and loving it and all this stuff we've been talking about, all the performances and the funny gags and the little scenes and the leather, as
Marco put it, yeah.
I was enjoying it all, but in the back of my mind the whole way through, because it's Tarantino and you don't know what's going to happen, I was thinking, what the hell is he going to do at the end of this film? Because I knew that Rick and Cliff would have something to do with it, but we all know the reality of the Manson family murders, particularly this chapter of it, the Sharon Tate murders. And it's such a touchy area, because as as Commode said about, the exploitative element to it, you'd have to really tread carefully here. And I thought, what is he going to do? What's going to happen here? And then what does transpire and what does happen, I considered to be cinematic genius, because what I felt Tarantino did was take real life bad guys that everybody can have an investment in hating, so to speak, because of the unspeakable things that they did to Sharon Tate and her entourage in real life. So these people, he took these real bad guys, and what he's done is he's used his characters to absolutely annihilate them in what is 5 full minutes of the most, some of the most extreme violence you'll see in a major picture. Brad Pitt versus, the Manson family, basically, and then Leo coming in, dusting them off. But why I think it was genius was because it was almost his answer to all his critics when they say, why do you like to use so much violence? Do you think violence is wrong in movies? And basically what he's done and said and done here is, here's the worst people you could possibly imagine. And in my movie, instead of them going and killing the people we know that they went and killed, they knock on the wrong door and they get absolutely annihilated by these two guys who you've just been watching for 2 hours. And you are going to love every second of it, because in real life violence, you know what these people did. So with the justice you see them get delivered to them on the screen is his answer to why he enjoys violence in movies, because that's not what happened.
Yeah.
That's not what happened in real life, and the two aren't related in a way, but he makes you elated that these people are getting their comeuppance. Whether you like that level of violence and blood and guts or not, I found it a little bit too much. I've got to admit my personal taste for that kind of thing is, it was a little bit crazy when he's smashing her face into the telephone and stuff, but some people love that sort of stuff. But the notion that these guys, these Manson family people, got their comeuppance because they knocked on the wrong door, because their murders were so gutless, they were such cowards. They broke into a pregnant woman's house and murdered everyone. Just absolutely despicable sort of act. And instead, in Tarantino's world and his use of violence, because it's not a violent film other than that. Some of his films have got a good amount of violence throughout, like Pulp Fiction or something. There's quite a lot of scenes, but you know what I mean? Yeah,
I think I pretty much agree with where you were coming from. I think we've talked about this before, and I think I sat there watching the film, and it was quite interesting, really, because, as you say, there's not much else in the film that's violent, but because it's Tarantino, the expectation is there's going to be violence. We've seen the rest of his catalogue. So I was actually sitting there throughout the film going, when's it coming? When's it coming? When's it coming? Whilst also...
Well, you know when it's coming. But, it's going to come at the end, but it's about how is it going to come?
But also, would it happen earlier in the film, or is it going to be the very end? Is there going to be something else that happens, maybe when he was at the ranch, earlier in the film? Was something going to happen there? But nothing, not proper violence ever occurred in the film until that end point. But also, you kind of know, as you were saying, what happens in real life, that's coming. And it felt like this spring getting turned on your back, like it was the pressure building all throughout the film. And then when it hits that moment, they knock on the wrong door and they go in. It's like this release valve goes off. And to me, it was like an elated feeling. So this violence was like,
well, this is exactly it. He makes even somebody who abhors violence, if they were open-minded enough to say, all right, I'll sit through this film, even they, deep down inside, I think, would feel what you've just described, of this elation that he's going to get them. These people are not going to kill Sharon Tate, because no matter what happens from this point on, they are, in combat with Cliff Booth. They're, you know, even if they beat him, they're not going to get away lightly. The dog, of course, the dog saves the day. The dog's amazing. Greatest performance in the film, if you ask me. And I reject that hypothesis. But, it is elation. It's a strange thing. And that's the genius of it, because he says, it's his answer. It's his answer for, this is why I do violence in my movies. Because it's an escapism. It's a way, because we live in a world of injustice where basically evil people get away with killing people all the time.
Yeah.
Right? There is no real Cliff Booths and heroes in life. They, but a lot of them die in wars, or they just, we just don't see or hear about it like we do in the films.
But there is in fairy tales.
And that's his answer. Here's the hero that you all want.
Yeah. And
it's not going to be pretty, but you're going to enjoy it because you know that these despicable people did an absolutely horrific thing to somebody that you've also just spent a couple of hours with through Margot Robbie's performance. And she's so wonderful and sweet and just exudes being just a really lovely, lovely person. Just on a human level. That's why I say I was thinking, what is he going to do here? What's he going to do? Because, to be honest with you, if he'd been like some sort of David Cronenberg, sick, twisted son of a bitch, and Lars von Trier or something, and then you'd actually entered into the Tate household with the killers, I would have walked out. I wouldn't watch that. I don't care who it is, I don't want to watch that. So when he knocks on Rick Dalton's door and he gets a very high Cliff Booth, who's just smoked
the acid cigarette,
LSD or something, hasn't he? Yeah, something crazy. But he's that again. It's that's why he established that thing with Bruce Lee earlier, because even when this guy's kind of half incapacitated because he's off his head on some acid, he's still deadly enough to take them out.
And to me,
him and his dog,
it's such a hilarious sequence. The fight with the dog, and to me, the moment he's bashing, I know you're saying it's probably too much.
It's vicious
for you.
Vicious,
but
savage.
For me, I found it hilarious myself. I thought it was like over the top.
Oh, I found it hilarious, but what I'm saying is I have to wince and turn away at a certain level. Whereas some people, I think, fans of blood and gore genres. Because that's a horror section. That it's not an action section.
Oh no, it's definitely
action. Is when people are, explosions going off, people jumping about. Yeah, you get some blood and guts, but really it's a horror section. But that's the whole point. These people, he says, I'm the devil.
Yeah.
I'm here to do the devil's business, which apparently he said in real life. And there's this whole thing, make it witchy, and they're like little witches, aren't they? Especially the one with the dark hair, and she's got a real look about her that's so nasty and witchy, and
it's because they're a cult, aren't they? I mean,
yeah, exactly. So it's like open season, and get ready. Like you said, it's going to be he's saved it all up for the end. Instead of spreading out that amount of violence throughout the picture like he's done before, we get it in a compounded 5 minutes of absolute mayhem. It's just perfectly rounded off at the end, perfectly executed, if you will. When Rick Dalton comes out with the flamethrower and just completely roasts her in the swimming pool. What a payoff moment that is.
Absolutely. But my favourite part of that is that he's listening to Snoopy versus the Red Baron whilst he's in the pool, which I think is such a
way. That is a cool factoid. I didn't know that.
But I think
that is very interesting.
I think the whole sequence is a real. It's perhaps the best payoff that Tarantino's done in a film, I think, in terms of a real kind of way to end it. It's different. I think it's so different structurally for him, especially considering it's more recent films. It's a bit of a different direction.
Yeah, he is a strange one. He does things his own way. Apparently his scripts are like novels. He has to cut loads out himself that he knows he won't be able to film. That they've all noted the amount of effort that he puts in to create backstories for everyone. I heard a story the other day about I think one of the cast said about it on Inglourious Bastards. One of the extras that was playing like a background bastard, so to speak. On the first day on set, Tarantino asked him what his backstory was, and he didn't have a clue what was going on or what to say, and he wasn't there the next day. That's how seriously.
Best do your homework.
That's how seriously he takes it, and he expects other people to take it. So
11, 12,
guy,
and 13.
I can't wait.
Yeah,
for
it'll be 10.
I can't
The
wait
next
for
one,
number
yeah.
10.
Well,
is it 10?
That's
the next one,
the
10?
debatable thing anyway, though, because
so
he's
10 is
classed
supposed
Kill
to be the
Bill
last one.
as one. For example, I'm not sure if Death Proof is included in his count. Yeah, but this is the thing that people have talked about in terms of it depends on how you add up his films.
On it as well. I mean, I've heard him interviewed about it, and he has said, he's not 100% only going to do 10. He leaves the options open, but it's because of his reasons for giving it up. He doesn't see a world where he's either capable of making films to that standard, because obviously the energy and the amount of effort it takes to put in to do a film like that really well it takes a lot out of you, and he's getting a bit older now. But like I said, Kurosawa was still working. I mean, Scorsese's still working, and he's not a spring chicken now. And The Irishman must have really took it out of him. We'll have to do another podcast about The Irishman at some point, because that's a film I'd like to watch again, and I'd like to go over and do a deep dive into that with you, because I think it'd really benefit from doing another watch and a talking about. But yeah, so fine.
But even if Tarantino carried on and just wrote instead of directing, that would be,
Oh, he said he'll still write, and like we've already discussed, he said he might do some television. But he's interested in theatre as well, because Hateful Eight was a play originally.
Plays
That's
that as
why
a play.
When you watch the film, it's mainly just in that one location. And interesting kind of take on it. But yeah, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a very different film. One that I'm looking forward to seeing again. I think I've seen it about 3 times now in the last year, maybe 4. And it's still fresh. There's still stuff in there that I haven't noticed yet. Like you just said about the Snoopy, Red Baron. I'd never even noticed that. That's really cool. But, he's that kind of film director, isn't it? You can watch his stuff and watch it and watch it. So,
there's so many, there's so many lines in there, and there's so many things in the background and stuff like that, that it is just packed with cultural references, and and it's such a great film and story and everything anyway, so that it is just one you can keep on watching and enjoy it, and it's a pleasant way to spend 3 hours.
Well, this has been a pleasant way to spend the last
it certainly is.
45 minutes or so talking to you, my old friend. I look forward to the next favorite film on our Cinema Plus podcast, and that was us talking about Once Upon a Time.
There we go.
Well, that's it for this week's episode. Be sure to take a look at our latest reviews and articles on our website, moremovies.co.uk, and come and say hi on Twitter. We'd love to hear from you, and always relish the opportunity to continue the ever-expanding conversation about cinema and the movies that we all love. Until next time, this has been Greg Fisher with Dave Roberts for Cinema Plus. That's a wrap.